Joy Goff-Marcil representing Florida House District 30, and this is our weekly virtual town hall. This is number 26, and I usually start the town hall with a recap of the COVID numbers as of October 7th. On the Department of Health dashboard, there have been 7.5 million cases in the United States with 210,972 deaths. In Florida, we've had 722,707 cases with 15,084 deaths. In Orange County, there's 41,409 cases with 491 deaths. And in Seminole County, 9,309 cases with 229 deaths. And then we also kind of like to look at the Rebecca Jones dashboard just to see what the difference is between the two. And today, the numbers are they're very different actually. In Florida, she has about 70,000 more cases recorded than the Department of Health, which is concerning. But she also has about a little over 100 less deaths. So we think maybe that one hasn't been updated yet. And so also she includes the prison population, which she has 23,226 cases in prison with 137 deaths. And it looks like she's added Florida K through 12 schools, which are showing 4,170 cases. I'm very excited today to have a very special guest, Coach Stan Van Gundy, former coach of the Orlando Magic. And he is going to be with us today, and we'll discuss all the different issues and take questions from the chat as well. And we are recording this because we have a lot of viewers that are excited about him being on as well, but are not able to join us at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So without further ado, I would introduce Coach Stan Van Gundy. And would you give us a little background of when you were here coaching Orlando Magic and your career, and a little bit of your background for us, please?
Sure, real quick. I coached college basketball from the time I got out of college in 1981. I know I'm really old. And from then until 1995, I was in college coaching for 14 years. Then I spent from 1995 until 2006 with the Miami Heat, the last 2 years there as the head coach. And then in 2007, I came to Orlando. I was the head coach here from 2007 to 2012. Stayed here the next 2 years, not working, and then went to Detroit as the president of basketball operations and head coach from 2014 to 2018. And then we moved back here, and now I'm working as an NBA analyst for TNT and NBA TV. So we've owned a home here in Seminole County for 13 years, but we've been in the state and have been homeowners in the state for 25 years. So what goes on in state politics is very, very important to us, as it is to all the other voters in Florida. We've been a part of this state a long time and care a great deal about it.
Is it true? I heard that you got on Twitter and just got overloaded with following very quickly. Is that true? You just recently got on Twitter and now you have this huge following?
Well, I think huge is all relative, as I see some of these other people. I got on in July, basically for political reasons. I was actually on a call with Monique Worrell, who, won the primary for state's attorney in the 9th Judicial District. And we had supported her campaign, and we were on a call with her and some of her other supporters. And they were talking strategy, and everybody was talking social media. And I was not on social media at all. My wife's on Facebook and Instagram. I wasn't on anything. And so I basically asked, should I get on? And my wife and other people said yes. So I got on in July, maybe, early to middle July. And, now I've got, I don't know, 115,000 followers. So I've, and that's probably because of the basketball, but, I've got to remember that I need to occasionally tweet out basketball stuff because I'm so, I'm so consumed with the political picture now that I forget. Well, somebody reminded me actually on Twitter the other day, like, hey, you'd get more people paying attention. They go to you because of basketball. You haven't tweeted anything about basketball in a week. So I've got to remember to do that every day to get a little bit of basketball in there.
Well, speaking of basketball, have you thought about what it would have been like if you were still coaching right now through COVID? Does that come to your thoughts a lot?
Yeah, I know that, obviously I know all those coaches that are there, and this whole thing of, Eric Spoelstra I worked with in Miami. He's a good friend, and they're still playing in the finals. And he has literally been in that bubble away from his wife and two young kids under the age of 2, and has been away from them for 3 months. And they can't leave. I mean, they've got that area and those restaurants in their hotel, and they got a walking path and some tennis courts and a golf course and all, but that's it. I mean, they haven't been out of there in 3 months. And yeah, I think it's a mental health challenge. And I know from your campaign how important mental health is to you and providing those services. And I think they could have used a lot of those services inside of that bubble for those players and coaches, referees who have been isolated for 3 months.
But would you say, though, it paid off as far as the cases compared to the other sports teams? It is noticeable that it's paying off being in a bubble like that.
Well, I think it's probably the only way to do it. I mean, it is amazing what Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, and his people pulled off because, they started with 22 teams in there, plus officials and reporters and everything else, and they have not had one case, not one. I mean, and so now the NBA is lucky they have a lot of money, and it cost them $125, $150 million to do all of this for 3 months, but it's really the only safe way to go about playing sports. And they've pulled it off. It's been an amazing accomplishment, actually. So I'm proud of what they've done, but I do get worried about some of these other people trying to play. The NFL's having to cancel games now. Baseball got through it, but they had to cancel a lot of games. The NBA and the WNBA, because they did their own bubble over in Bradenton, they've been the two that have been able to pull it off without a case, and they're to be applauded for that. Yeah,
and I've been, in my mind, I think for mental health, it's been good to have sports. My husband is a big sports fan, and I noticed he was feeling a lot better once sports happened, even though it's a very weird situation with sports, but I think it is good for mental health. I am really concerned about the college level and high school level and how it's working out with that, because I know I talked about even last town hall that my daughter's high school's football team was in quarantine. I guess they're probably going to be coming out pretty soon out of that, but I just don't know how they can do that safely with the way our contact tracing not being enough in place and the testing and all that. And I know they are spending a lot of money on testing. The public school system is spending a lot of money testing the athletes.
Yeah, I actually came out sort of against that, to be honest. I'm a sports guy, but look, if we had unlimited money, I think that the NBA has sort of proven that if you're willing to invest enough, we can get this thing under control. I mean, I think that's what this proves. We just haven't been willing to, as a country or as a state, to invest what we need to do it. And if the schools had unlimited amount of money, then I think that would be great. But to spend the money on testing athletes, but not all the other students who are going back to school live in person, and not the teachers, and not the custodial staff that is cleaning up. I just don't know how you justify that with where we are now. Prioritizing, as much as I'm into sports, prioritizing sports ahead of education and other people, I think it's hard to justify.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, and it's frustrating when you think about how if we all could just sacrifice 2 weeks of our lives, we could knock this out. I mean, I was just hearing that part just blows my mind. And so instead, we have this group of people that are trying to do, what's right, and then we have the ones that refuse to participate. It's frustrating.
It really is. And I think that, I'm old, and I try to think back of, what has changed. And obviously we've had all kinds of technological advancements and everything else. But I think what's changed with us as a people is, when I was young, that whole concept that my parents certainly believed in, and I'm sure yours did, it was just part of the time, really believed in and took pride in sacrificing for the greater good. And then somewhere along the way, it became desired almost. I think it started, in Reagan's presidency, and I don't mean to single him out and blame him. I just mean around that time in the 80s, this ethos that greed is good sort of started, and every man for himself. And, maybe that's okay. I don't think it is, but maybe you can get by with that when everything's good. But then when you hit something like this pandemic, and people are getting sick and people are out of work, the fact that we aren't willing to sacrifice, I mean, even a little, like you won't wear a mask. That's not even a sacrifice, but people won't even do that to help the people around them. That's the negative trend in our country, I think, that has set in over the course of my lifetime, that I would, more than anything else, would love to see reversed. Because I think if we could reverse that, we could attack all of these problems that we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, and not really acknowledging the amount of deaths, and 200,000 since January, over 200,000, and expecting maybe another 200,000 in the next few months. It's unacceptable, where it's now the third leading cause of death. It's unacceptable. And I don't know. I feel like I'm glad the election is coming, because I have hope with that. But right now, it's not looking good. Now, as far as the election goes, we were going to talk about some of the amendments that are on the ballot. We've been talking in our town hall about, we had 2 town halls on Amendment 3 and 1 on Amendment 4. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but you had mentioned before we started this that you had some thoughts about Amendment 3. Did you want to tell us about your thoughts on that one?
Well, I was just confused on it, because I think off the top of a lot of people's head, if you just hear open primaries, I think there's a lot of people out there who would like us to be more bipartisan or nonpartisan. And so it all sounds good. But when you get into the details of it, it's not just non-party affiliated people being able to vote in one of the primaries. It's
Uh-oh. We
problem
lost.
with
There you
that
are.
is, well, there's multitude of problems, but it really harms progressives. It harms minorities. But if you just think of it off the top of your head, I think what you would have is a lot of parties,
Uh-oh,
because if I have 5 Democrats running and only 2 Republicans, and I split the Democratic vote 5 ways in an open primary, people who would side with the Democrats, and only split the Republican vote 2 ways, well, there's a good chance we're going to end up with 2 Republicans in the general election. And so I think what would happen, right, is I think parties would try to come down strong on people on their side and say, we don't want them to run. We want to make sure our candidate gets in, and we wouldn't have robust primaries. We'd be selecting candidates and discouraging others, and that's anti-democratic to me. So there's no doubt in my mind, listening to people and thinking it through, that I'll vote no on Amendment 3.
Yeah, and that's why the Democrats are against it, the Republicans are against it, the League of Women Voters against it, the Florida, let's see, there was several other organizations were against it as well. So I think the lesson learned from it is that I think there is a general consensus that we need to include the non-party affiliated, but not this particular way. I think that's what, and when I had my other people on, when we were talking about that, I was curious, why did they pick this jungle primary way of doing it? I don't know. So that was, that's that amendment. And then the other one that we talked about, Amendment 4, we called, Jonathan Weber was on, and he said we call it number 4 because it was confusing people from the last election. We're still fighting over Amendment 4 from 2018. So that's the one, number 4, I'm going to be voting no on that one as well. And to recap that one, let's see, I have the ballot here with me. It's pretty long. Let's see. Okay, this is the one. Constitutional Amendment 4. This is the one that requires all proposed amendments or revisions of the state constitution.
Oh, yeah. That's just awful. I mean, that's opponents of, direct democracy. That's all it is. And so that one to me is pretty simple. Let's go back to Amendment 4 in 2018 and the great work Desmond Meade and the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition did. Well, you've got to go out and get all of those signatures, and you've got to raise a lot of money to run a campaign to get on the ballot. And they got nearly 2/3 of the vote. And what this amendment would do, this amendment number 4 would do, is saying, okay, congratulations. Now you got to do it again 2 years later. And it would become almost prohibitive in terms of time and money. It would discourage people from the process altogether. And the people sponsoring that clearly just want to end the process of amendments being added by the citizens of our state. I can't believe that anyone who says that they're for democracy could possibly support Amendment 4 on this ballot this year. I just, that one to me, number 1 and number 4 are the two to me that were mind-boggling. I mean, number 1 is just a dog whistle. We already, citizens can't vote, but now we want to put that in writing as a dog whistle to the, racists and xenophobes out there on the ballot. It's just a language thing that really does nothing. I'd vote no on that one also. Those two to me were the easiest. Amendment 4 was disappointing to me that it got on the ballot, that it was able to raise enough money and enough signatures to get on the ballot.
Yeah, and under that one, only very wealthy people, billionaires, would be able to get something on the ballot if that were to pass Amendment 4. So we definitely want to vote no, or I'm voting no on that one. And let's see, 5 and 6, do you have any thoughts on those? That's 5 is the limitations on homestead property tax assessment, increased portability period to transferred accrued benefit. And the League of Women Voters are no on that one, and citing that it's going to take a lot of money away from local government.
Right. Yeah, and look, I mean, in a vacuum, I don't know probably enough to say if the portability period should be 2 years or 3 years. But since we've already had it at 2 years, to increase it, exactly, that's what I read, is we're just now going to have people who are exempt from those taxes for another year, and that's taking money away. And especially to pass that now in 2020, where quite honestly, because of the pandemic, you know, we've got an economic problem right now. We don't need less money coming into the state at this point. So I'll vote no on that for sure.
Yeah, it just seems like it disproportionately affects people too, because these are all homeowners, and it usually, it's not like the wealthy homeowners are gonna pay more. So they're not. They're the ones who get the biggest tax break on this, in my opinion. Do you know how it actually works when it says portability? I thought that if you own your house, you have that save your homes, but then if you sell your house, then you start over with the new tax. Is it saying you can port your savings to the next house?
That I'm not sure of, but I do know that if, say, I pass my house on to my kids, somebody like that, then they can continue it out another year and things like that. So that part was enough for me to vote no on. You know, but I'm not sure. Like, I think you're right, though. I do think what it does is if I buy another house, I then can, you know, my homestead exemption, I can pass on extend for another year, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. As you said, almost everything in our tax code benefits people in my tax bracket, to be quite honest. I mean, you know, it just does. And then that's one of the reasons we're where we are financially as a state and as a country. We could do so much more for people if we would tax people in my tax bracket and way above my tax bracket at a much fairer rate. And that's what I meant when I go back to, people used to understand that, you know, like everybody would love to write a smaller check to the IRS. Everybody would. But it just seemed my parents actually took pride in paying their taxes, you know, like this is something I do for my country. And my parents weren't sitting down and trying to find a tax loophole and a way out of things. And I've followed their example and haven't done, like, this is how we fund our country, and there's people who need this money, and let's help them. And it just seemed like the people I grew up around, you know, my friends' parents, they understood that. And now it's just like, people look at Donald Trump's taxes now at $750, and that's okay with them. You know, like that makes him smart. That's what you're supposed to do, is figure out a way to pay less taxes. But if we have somebody in that income bracket paying $750 a year, then that means we have to fund our country on the backs of middle and working class people and even the working poor. It's just not fair. It's not right. I can, and certainly there's a lot of people above me, we can shoulder more of the load. So why shouldn't we?
Yeah. Well, it's very nice to hear that from someone in your tax bracket saying that. It's unusual to have that, hear that. Now on the Orange County, well, you're in Seminole County, so you don't have the Orange County, because we have 3 charter amendments in Orange County, and I don't know if you looked at those just out of curiosity, but they're good amendments. They're very environmentally friendly. And
well, I would say, Joy, that probably gets back to one of your big issues, right? Home rule. when you get, the more local you get on these things, the better you get. I mean, that's been one of your principles, because people in Orange County know what's needed in Orange County. You know, so rather than having the state make decisions for Orange County, let Orange County make decisions for themselves.
Seminole County fighting for the rural boundary and
Absolutely.
That was quite a fight too. I was gonna look, see what else is new here. What did you, well, I'm pretty much know what you think about this, but I would like to hear your comments on the governor's proposed legislation against peaceful protesting.
Yeah, you know, it's just so disappointing. And again, I just, we're going in the wrong direction. I mean, we used to have shared beliefs, Democrats and Republicans, like voting. Everybody was for it. Like, we wanted to get more people to vote. You know, we went through the civil rights movement and we passed the Voting Rights Act. And now, like, voter suppression's okay on one side, and we don't even agree on voting anymore. And, you know, here we are on protests. We used to agree that we were a nation of free speech. We believed in the First Amendment and that people should be able to go out and voice their beliefs and their protests. And now, because what's being voiced does not line up with the beliefs of some people, now we're going to put in actions like Governor DeSantis had, basically to intimidate people from going out there at all. Because he would say, oh, peaceful protests are fine. Yeah, but if I'm in a group of more than 7 people, if you read his executive order, and I could be out there with, I was in a Black Lives Matter march, I don't know, back in April, and there were hundreds of people. By his executive order, if somebody takes a bottle and throws it through a window, I'm liable because I'm at the protest. Yeah. Well, having something like that in there is simply to intimidate me from going out there at all, peaceful or otherwise. We already have laws on the book that will take care of violent action. It's on the books now. What do you think? It's legal if I throw a bottle or something at a police officer? That's legal now? No, it's not. What he wants to do is expand it so by association I can be guilty. So that to me is intimidation. And then the part of that where it's almost like our stand your ground law, which is disastrous. But if I'm driving a car and you're blocking the road and I feel threatened, I can just drive my car through that crowd with no liability for myself whatsoever. All of these things are basically saying to people, you're taking a huge risk if you go out and protest. And so people won't be as likely to go out there. Again, it is everything that Governor DeSantis and the Republicans have done, in my opinion, is anti-democracy. I mean, not giving returning citizens the right to vote, making them pay the fines and fees in a virtual poll tax, that's anti-democratic. This executive, whatever it is, proposal that he has is anti-democratic. It just, I don't know what amendments they're for, except the Second Amendment. I know they're for that, but I guess the rest of the Constitution just doesn't matter as much to them.
Yeah, and I do want to stick up for some Republicans because there are a pretty big group of them that are not happy with this either, and are still wanting the right to vote, especially. I mean, I think that there are a lot of them that are not on board with voter suppression. So I do have hope with that as well. Let's see, looking here. This is my update here. It says On Monday, the Orlando City Commission approved contracts with 2 groups in the hopes of more police accountability, one to review policies at Orlando Police Department and one to provide cultural education to officers. Orlando Police Department has the 4th highest rate of use of force in the whole country. I didn't realize that. It is worth noting, however, that a former police officer leads the consulting group hired to review OPD practices with a contract price tag of $800,000. Well, that's something.
The only problem I have there is, and I've been pretty active in the whole criminal justice reform stuff that's going on. I've learned a lot about it. And the problem I have there is even the police departments who have tried to introduce cultural education, implicit bias training, all of these things. The problem is the trainers in virtually all cases are other law enforcement people. And I think there's 2 problems there. Is one, their area of expertise is in policing. It's not in cultural differences and racial bias. But the second thing is I think that what gets lost in this whole thing is we always break it down into good cops and bad cops. And I think what we need to think more about is the culture of policing. You know, the whole idea of what are you there for? What's your job? The kind of people we want in there. And I think that there is a police culture which is arrest the bad guys, throw them in jail, which is certainly part of the job. That's what they're trained for. And so a law enforcement person coming in teaching these things are coming from that same viewpoint. I think what I would like to see is that kind of training coming from grassroots Black activists in the community, coming in and teaching those kind of things, teaching the viewpoint of here is why Black people in Orlando, since we brought up their force, don't like the police, are afraid of the police. I don't think a police officer can go in and teach that as well. And so I love the idea that they want to do more training, but I think who does the training is really, really important.
I will say in this case that the firm doing the review of policy is led by an old police officer. The firm doing the culture, or it's actually not a firm, the group doing the cultural training is actually a group from Bethune-Cookman University, from like their social justice, their social and racial justice institute, I believe. So hopefully that is, more along.
And he's great, by the way. So yeah, that would be a major step forward because he's great. And the other thing we need to address with policing, and this is really hard, and certainly Representative, even in her time, on the Maitland City Council could address this more. But one of the big problems with policing that we have in terms of making reform are the police unions themselves. I mean, they're vehemently anti-reform. And that's who, all of our municipalities, counties, everybody has to negotiate with when they're doing all these things. And they're a major obstacle to getting any police reform done. I mean, there's not, they say they're not, but, you get the Police Benevolence Association or the Fraternal Order of Police and start breaking down, okay, what reforms are you for? They're not for any. I mean, so we're not going anywhere until we rein in the police unions, and that is a very, very hard thing to do.
Do you think there's value to having the police officers have to live in the community where they serve as a requirement, kind of like I have to live in my district that I serve?
I mean, I think it would help, but it's really interesting when you get into the statistics on police things, and even having a more racially diverse force doesn't really help until you get the force up over 40%. What really helps in less violence in a police force, and it probably helps in every area of our country you're an example of it, is when you put more women on the force, that's what brings down violence. And so my wife and I it's why we're supporting your campaign and a lot of other people in this area. And this is statistically based stuff. You just get an entirely different approach when you get more women in leadership positions. I mean that. I mean, and I'm a man, so, you know, you just get difference. And there's a group out of Texas that has studied all of these things in police violence. And the number one way you lower police violence, it's not community policing. It's not even racially diverse police forces. It's not even necessarily policy-based. The number one way you can get to a less violent police force is employ more women as police officers. They come at problems differently. Their perspective is different. And one of the reasons is without, you know, it's not this stereotypical stuff that, well, women are more empathetic and all of that. That may or may not be true. I know plenty of men who have empathy, and I know some women who don't. But what it comes down to, and I had never thought of this, if I'm a woman police officer, it doesn't really help me if my first response is to try to overtake somebody physically. I mean, I might be a 125-pound woman out there, and I've got a suspect that's 220 pounds. Well, if my answer to, you know, de-escalating the situation is I'm going to throw this guy in a headlock or something, you know, good luck. So they develop other strategies to de-escalate situations as much out of necessity as anything. And so they have more tools in their toolkit to develop, you know, to de-escalate these situations, and they become better officers because of it. That's just a theory that I've read. But the facts are more women on the police force, less violence, less of, you know, complaints of, you know, use of force problems, all of that, it comes down. Those are factual things in studies. Other people may have different theories as why. So I'm saying let's go out and recruit more women to be on our police forces in Orange County and Seminole County. And that's going to help.
Wow, that all makes sense. I had not heard of it, but it does make sense. And it reminded me of when I was on the city council, I worked with the fire chief who was a woman, and she was one of the first women fire chiefs in Florida. And she talked to me about, we talked about her situation, because fighters were historically a men's profession, and she would be asked, like, how are you going to get someone out of a burning building? And she's like, well, I would figure it out, just like you use your brain. And and so it's very interesting to think about that. And she was also saying that women, not necessarily all women, like you said, that are more nurturers, and that's a really good quality to have as a firefighter, because really firefighters are more healthcare providers nowadays than they are actually firefighters. So that's interesting to think of it in the police force environment as well.
Well, and I also think, Joy, that, you know, and again, this is a little bit stereotypical. I heard it after or leading into actually the elections of 2018, the midterms where you got elected. And it has rung true to me, stereotypical or not, it has rung true to me and to my wife that there's a saying that men run to be somebody and women run to do something. You know, and I think that's true in my experience. And look, I've run into a lot of great men in politics, so I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but I do think, you know, in large percentage, there's a lot of men running for the position and the prestige and the recognition, whatever it is. And at least the women candidates that we have supported, they're always just talking about policy and what we can do for people. And that's why I would say, you know, we've supported candidates nationwide as well as statewide, nationwide. We've got kids in Michigan. We support candidates there. But I'm going to say probably 90% of our money has gone to women candidates, and intentionally so. Now, in some of the United States Senate races, you know, there's not a woman running, or at least not one on the Democratic side. And so we have supported men, but I'm going to say 90% of our money has probably gone to women. I just think we need a paradigm shift in how people approach politics. And unfortunately, as a white man, I don't think white men as a group are going to be the ones that are going to change the whole way we do business in politics. And I thought the 2018 midterms were such a positive step for our country in the number of women like yourself who were elected. And, you know, I also just think there's a positive when our legislatures look more like our population. You know, when we have, if 14% of our population is going to be Black people, well, I'd like to see our legislative bodies be 14% on a nationwide basis. If 51% of our population is going to be women, and they're only 31% of our legislators at this point, that's a problem. Like, let's at least get it to where it looks like America. And there's a group out there, I think that's their name, you know, that they're raising money for women candidates, you know. I just think it's a positive. I've noticed the positives everywhere we've been, and that's why we're supporting women candidates all over Florida as well as elsewhere.
Yeah, and here in Florida, the minority, which you probably know this, but in the Florida House, the minority party is half women, or about half. Which
now all we've got to do is make you the majority party.
Yes.
Absolutely, but it just, those are positive steps that we would like. And to me, we can delve into every issue, and that's important. And I think every candidate needs to do that. But I think even bigger, we just need a different approach to how we govern, the type of candidates we have, and the type of leaders that we have. And one of the things I say all the time that a lot of people argue with, but I see a lot of things I don't like in some of our leaders, but I always say we get the leaders we deserve, you know, because we're the ones out there picking them and we vote for them. And if we're going to allow people to act in a certain way, govern in such a way, and we're going to vote for them, well, then we get what we deserve. And so in this state, we've had Republican rule for 20 years. I mean, total Republican rule for 20 years. And then we get to COVID, and the unemployment system is a mess here, an absolute mess. I mean, it's a mess. And it was designed to work this way. It was designed to not have people pay into the unemployment system, you know, and workers are going to get $275 a week for as little as 12 weeks. It was designed this way. Well, that's the ethos of the governing party in our state. And so we need a different kind of leadership. We don't just need a different unemployment system. We need a leadership that cares more about working people and people in need than care about wealthy people and the corporate class. So yeah, my wife and I, those are the kind of candidates we've looked for, even before we get to the issues, like, who does this person care about? You know, who are they representing? If we get more to that, I think then we're going to have the kind of leadership we need to have and deserve to have.
I agree, definitely. Is there anything, because we're getting towards the end of the hour, but is there anything else that you would really want to talk about that's on your mind?
No, I just think, like, we just need to keep encouraging people especially young people, to get involved in our system, you know, to get out and vote, to get involved with candidates and campaigns and learn how things work. I mean, really work, like what people do to get elected, how all that works, what goes into a campaign. Everybody, but especially young people, but everybody to really be involved in the process, certainly to vote, but even more than that, to contribute. And look, that might be $1 or $5. I mean, you don't have to be wealthy. I mean, if, you know, I said to my kids when they were in high school, like, you know, take your lunch money one day, skip lunch and give it to a candidate of your choice. It's $5, but participate in the process, you know, learn how it works. And I'm really proud. I got 4 kids in their 20s and they're all engaged and none of them make a lot of money, but they all give a little bit to candidates of their choosing where they live. Like, you have to get involved in this process because you're going to end up complaining about things going on. And, you know, if you're going to complain, like, get involved, change your leaders. I mean, you know, I love the saying, if you want to change the game, you've got to change the players, right? And we did that in your district in 2018. And we want to do it in a couple of areas up here in my district and across the country. Change our leadership and everything will change. And we only do it if everybody gets involved. And look, I want them to all vote for the policies I believe in, but I'm for everybody getting involved. Everybody in our country needs to get out and use their voice. If a Republican, even a right-wing Republican, needed help with registering to vote and I could help them, I would do that. Like, we need everybody involved, and then we'll get the kind of country, state, legislative districts, communities that we want, if everybody will get out and use their voice, and not just to yell and scream when you don't like something, but to get involved positively in the process.
Yeah. And people who say they don't like politics, they'll say, oh, I don't like politics. Well, it's maybe they don't like it, but it affects them every day and everything they do. So they have to, like you said, they need to get involved so they understand how politics affects them, even when they say they don't like it. My race, or I shouldn't say my race, my elected office, the House of Representatives, and also the Florida Senate, seem to be a group of people that people don't realize who their representative is or their senator. And it's interesting, like sometimes they'll know their US congressperson or the senators from the state. And of course they know the president, and they might know their mayor. They know their mayor usually, but for whatever reason, the Florida House of Representatives and the Florida Senate, people don't know. And I think that's the disconnect when you were saying the home rule issue too. That's why my colleagues can go up there and pass these really bad laws that affect local governments, because they aren't as connected to their communities. So that's something else I'm trying to get the word out too, to know your down ballot people, because it's really important. And that's
it really is. I mean, I think almost the more local you go, the more those people have an actual effect on your day-to-day life.
Exactly.
You know, and so everybody will go vote for either Biden or Trump, but and certainly that's very important. But in reality, your everyday life is going to be affected more by the Florida legislature and your county board of commissioners and your town council. And so if you're only going to really know about either your local people or the people on the national level, you'd be better off knowing the local people. And I've also said to my own kids and to others, the other great thing about elections like yours is you can make more of a difference as a single person. You know, I can make more of a difference in District 30 if in a normal year I'm going out knocking on doors for you then I can make a difference in the presidential election, you know, and, you know, $100 to your campaign helps more than makes more of an impact than $100 to the presidential campaign. And so not only do people in your own district affect your lives more, you can, on the other hand, impact those elections more. So get involved on a local level. And I think I think people would be really happy with what goes on when they do get involved on a local level.
Yeah, and I think it empowers them, makes them feel like they're doing something. If like calling on the phone, or in the old days knocking on doors, but or just phone banking and calling voters and connecting with them, and I think that gives people a sense of accomplishment, and also gets them less depressed about the state of our state and country right now. So I think it's a good for the mental health as well, mental health aspect. Haley, do we have any questions in the chat?
I saw nothing's been sent in.
Okay, because I see something in there, but I don't know what that is.
That was for me earlier.
Oh, okay.
The question, yeah.
Did you have a question for the coach, Haley?
Let's see. I'm curious on your thought right now. I know something that's been striking to me in just the past couple of days, you know, as we've seen the president in and out of the hospital, and, you know, just the care that he has access to versus the care that most Americans have access to. So I'm just curious, and especially like in Florida, you know, where like Medicaid expansion has been voted down, unfortunately, before by the legislature, like what your thoughts are on that, and just like that highlight recently.
Yeah, it's ironic to me that, and this could go for any public official, but it's ironic to me that President Trump, who has spent a good part of his 4 years trying to eliminate the Affordable Care Act, doesn't like government-run health care, is receiving top-of-the-line government-run health care. That's how he's getting through this process, through government-run health care. And, you know, I just, a lot of people have spoken out about this in the last week or so, and I totally agree. I don't know how we justify that elected officials can get taxpayer-funded health care, at least on the federal level, and everyone else in America can't. I mean, we elect them and send them to office. Why can President Trump and Congress and senators get great health care, top-of-the-line health care paid for by us, but we're not entitled to that health care? So I know I'm a little more liberal than most, but to me, we should be talking about, you know, Medicare for all, or at the very least, like what President Biden, I'm getting ahead of myself, Vice President Biden is talking about with public options, and certainly with what, you know, the representative's talking about, expanding Medicaid. Like, why shouldn't people have the right, not a privilege, the right to health care? And I think from cradle to grave, they should have the right to health care. And if we can do it for President Trump, we should be able to do it for everyone else. And I think it's hard to justify not doing it for other people. But I think a lot of things going on are hard to justify right now.
Yeah, and these are the same people that are going to be most likely get the virus too, the people that don't have health care.
Right. I do think we had one other question, maybe if the other user on MVEUR1040.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I just have a process question to Joy and Haley about availability of signage, yard signs.
Well, that you can direct you to my campaign And joy@joyforfl.com is my campaign email.
Right.
So
How do I just send an email request, or how
with
do,
your address.
with
And
the address and
yeah.
telephone number, or you have my email?
Yeah, telephone would be good too, just in case the volunteer
Sure.
can't find something or gets confused about the location.
Okay. Thank you. I've enjoyed listening.
Good. I'm glad you were on with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're in the southernmost part of District 30. We're just on the edge of Winter Park.
Oh, excellent. Thank
So,
you.
thought we would take a listen. I've enjoyed Coach Gundy.
Yeah, he's
Thank
great.
you.
Well, I guess we are almost at that hour flew by. It was great talking with you. And are you still there, Coach?
I am here. I
Okay,
see you.
You look like you got frozen there.
I was sitting very still.
Yeah, it was a very enjoyable hour. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on with us today.
Absolutely. And thanks for all the good work you're doing. And we will look forward to continuing to support you as you help all of us in Florida.
And thank you. And we'll be following you on Twitter and watching for those basketball tweets.
Okay. Fair enough.
Bye.
Bye-bye.